And that's even questionable.
Is there anything else for today?
That's all we had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for all of
Thanks
your
for coming.
support.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's hope
Sorry if
great
you
weather.
him on the board.
Well, we can handle it almost anything.
The abuse is equally spread around.
That's
We've been abusing each other for
Long
almost 2
time.
decades.
Yeah.
2 decades,
long time.
yes.
And now it's on the record.
Ta-da.
okay. Well, thank you again. That'll be it for the annual joint meeting of the Washington County Board of Commissioners and the Washington County Fair Board. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I'm sorry I was late. I went upstairs.
Not a problem.
Good luck this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll just take
Thank you, Commissioner Willie.
Absolutely.
and then
Happy to serve.
to our next topic. Thanks, Leah.
Huh? Who are they? Good. Good. That's the city. We'll deal with it. Yeah. I'm back.
Hey, Kathy, feel free to come on up. You and Aaron. Oh, Joe, you're here too. And Rick? Ah,
You just like
Joe.
but nobody else.
I just wanted to make sure there was enough set up between the joint meeting with the Fair Board and whatnot. So whenever everyone is settled, we can get started. So just by way of preference, we had our this year two days or 1.5 day really of budget committee meetings for the Clean Water Services budget. A good budget committee. I want to really once again compliment everyone for the good questions and to the team for the very thorough answers that we got. I mean, there wasn't a question that I threw your way that didn't come back with just a spot on answer. So thank you very much. We had discussion at the budget committee with regard to the proposal for the generally semi-annual or annual rate increase of 4% and wanted to come back to that as the full Clean Water Services Board of Directors. So that's the context for today's conversation. And so we'll turn it over to all of our subject matter experts. Rick, is there anything that you wanted to say to help kick off this topic as well?
Well, I would like to thank you for all the questions in advance. So it made our jobs much easier to know, where the specific areas of interest were. So that was really helpful. And I do appreciate your kind words. I felt like the team really stepped in and did a great job. We look forward to presenting some of the options today and anticipate more homework to do afterwards based on your feedback.
Okay, terrific.
Well, thank you, Chair Harrington and members of the board. I'm Kathy Leader, CFO with Clean Water Services, and I'm here today to talk about rates. And you can't talk about rates without talking about our forecast. I wanted to start out and just give you the premise of the forecast and the basis of our rate development. The district maintains a 10-year financial forecast, which is updated annually. As part of this process, we evaluate the need for rate increases or debt issuances to cover planned capital investments included in the district's capital improvement plan. The district develops the annual budgets and financial forecasts in alignment with the financial strategic direction established by the Clean Water Services Board. This has resulted in the building of reserves over time to fund large capital projects and extraordinary expenditures while avoiding the need to spike rates. The district's strong financial position has resulted in a AAA rating with Standard & Poor's and AA1 with Moody's. As part of this upgrade reflects a strong management practice. And within that, with other items listed with the rating agency that impact your rating, one key thing that stands out to me when you talk about financial forecasts is with strong management practices, track record of regular rate adjustments and well-developed 10-year financial forecasts and capital improvement plans with reasonable assumptions. They're updated annually and provide the board with a clear trajectory of rate increases necessary to meet revenue requirements. So in looking at our forecast, we're going to thumb through some different examples of different rate options. When you look at our forecast, these are some of the assumptions that are in there. They're on the screen now. Right now, our forecast includes a 4% annual increase for both sanitary and swim rates. As we talked about for the 25-26 fiscal year, that results in an average household bill for CWS of $2.65 per month. That would be effective on July 1. And if you looked at that number annually, that's $331.80 annually as an increase to an average household customer. For the forecast itself, when you're looking at it, materials and service costs are included with an increase at 5% per year as you trajectory out in future years. This is based on historical trending. Personal services is also trended out at 8%, also based on historical trending. So we've looked at how our actuals are coming into play, and we roll that out into our future years. The plan also includes our capital costs that are based on our 5-year capital improvement plan, which incorporates our master plans and any of our replacement needs. And an additional adjustment that we do when we're looking at assumptions and forecasting is we look at trending of actual spend for the budget. And so the forecast actually shows recent trending that reflects a 90% spend on budget for departmental operating and capital. So we adjust our rates in our forecast for that too. So those are the assumptions as we move into then our analysis. Before I talk a little bit about this revenue forecast and fund balance, I want to talk a little bit about the budget on the expenditure side. First, we'll talk about expenditure as we go into these rates. The approved budget reflects a $7.5 million increase or 5.7% increase in operating costs compared to the prior. This increase relates to like 4 added FTE. It relates to mid-year adds and redesignations, COLA, pay for performance, insurance costs, PERS costs. And on the supply side, it takes into account energy cost increases, software cost increases, increases also in our billing with the other cities, with particular TVW that bills for us, along with Lake Oswego's contract that we bill with. These are all compounding expenditures that happen in this year and are going to move forward. And those are those compounding expenses, the revenues that we are projecting, they're there to cover those compounding expenditures with increases annually on the budget. So when you look at the graph for you there, this is with the planned $75 million bond issuance, and you look at the impact. So the blue bar is the 4% annual rate increase. The solid bars, going in order, highest to lowest, show the impact on revenue with a 3%, 2%, or 0% increase. And the dotted lines are then showing you the impact on reserves. So cumulative revenue reduction, but also reserve reduction when you look at the different options. So on a 3% rate increase, that has a cumulative impact of 17.9 million over that through fiscal year 2033.
So that's assuming we stay at 3% each of those years,
So that's
or just the cumulative impact of a one-year decision?
just a 1 year. Thank you for clarifying that, because that our forecast does include 4% year out after that. So yes, that's 1 year, 3%. A 2% increase would have a cumulative impact of 35.8 million. So that's reduction in revenue over time and reduction in reserves.
But again, same concept that the chair just said, it's a 1 year, 2%,
1 year, 2%,
and 4%.
4% in out years based on our current forecast. And at zero, that would be 71.7 million over that same time period, and that is also a reduction in reserves for the district. And that's with the bond sale. I also show it here also without the bond sale to show you, obviously, the cumulative impacts of a rate adjustment are the same, whether you have the bond issuance or not. So those stay the same over the different scenarios. However, the overall reduction in reserves, because there was no bond sale in 2033, is about a $39 million less in reserves. You don't do the bond sale. And the reason why it's not equivalent to the 75 is we've been making debt payments on it over time that adjust the amount. And you remember from the approved budget, the capital investments are planned to increase by 42.7 million or 41% compared to the prior year. This graph is showing you the forecast for combined sanitary and surface water CIP projects from 2026 through 2030.
Kathy, could you run that statement by me again?
Mhm.
That the capital improvement budget, I didn't hear it correctly.
For 26, what we're proposing.
Yes.
So the capital improvement budget for 26 is 42.7 million greater than the prior year. It's like a 41% increase over
How many percent?
41% increase.
Okay.
And then this is showing you the 26 through 30, and that's stacked of Sandy and swim projects over the time.
And I think through the budget detail, you reminded me that that was driven by both the East Basin Master Plan that we had and finishing out prior projects that were in that 5-year CIP.
Yep. And then also West Basin is coming into there, and any renovations.
Or yes, looking out the
Looking out
future.
forward.
Yeah, 5 years. Yep. Thank you.
And historically, the district's capital program averaged 50 million per year. Capital investments increased starting in 2024 at 81 million. So that's actual 81 million in 24. And as you can see from this graph up here, we're planning another 396 million in the following 3 years. And those increases, you're looking at things like Ripple, some permit required construction at Forest Grove, pump station needs. And when you look further out, even for 3 years out, our average capital has increased from that $50 million level to now we're on average 100 million a year. And you see in there some of the West Basin, some of the conveyance projects in those outer years.
Partially a question that I have now that I didn't have previously because I just didn't think about it. Our region has grown, right? And Washington County has been the primary area for UGB expansions over these last 10, 15 years. Have we reached a tipping point then? You've helped me appreciate that the system is, over 50 years old and you have to replace those systems. But also we've had South Hillsborough, Cornelius has had expansion, Forest Grove's had expansion, Beaverton's had expansion. It just seems like the number of housing units has continued to grow and grow. And you don't just build capacity on a straight line. There are these, I imagine there are these inflection points. And so I'm just wondering, historically, you had a CIP in the $50 million range. are we just gonna see it mostly in that $100 million range, both because of the scale, but also because the scale of construction costs?
There's a lot of factors that will contribute to that number. Definitely the growth and the scale, but the level of treatment technology continues to be an important factor as we're doing our projections and understanding what the needs are going to be and how those stricter limits are going to impact us
Okay.
as well. So that everything you mentioned is correct as a piece, but I would just add that that's that one other unknown that's out there a little bit.
No matter how much I learn and increase my knowledge each and every year, I always benefit from the reminders.
I mean, what I'm getting out of this slide and from your comment is like, we're not going to be headed back to the $50 million a year capital investment time anytime soon, if ever.
I would say that's definitely correct.
Okay.
The
That's important for us to keep in mind, I think, as we're thinking about the big picture here.
And so when you're looking at the capital spend, to me, you can see that we need rates in order to invest in this capital growth
Yeah.
and just operations.
So the capital growth has escalated quickly on paper.
Mhm.
What were the factors that, were we waiting to do things? I'm having trouble understanding why the big leap.
Mhm.
Well, for instance, like the lab is a much needed
Okay.
project that, and some of that's based on technology and new requirements for testing. And so you see that happening on the treatment side too. New requirements, new and higher, more expensive answers to those questions.
I'm sorry. I was just going to add, yeah, the lab is certainly one of the factors here, but a copper limitation at Forest Grove required us to build primary treatment, which was $50 million. Again, that's shocking to me. I would have guessed 25. Things have gotten very expensive, so that is not
What's
a
the
gee whiz
degree
high
of
tech.
increases? It's the degree of cost.
It's also the degree of cost. So even a pretty basic process that's been around is quite expensive.
It's just
These
like
days.
such a shock, and I'm trying to make sure I understand all the different
Yeah.
pieces. And it would seem if we had this big shock, I would have thought that there might have been a little lessening, but it doesn't appear that way moving forward.
I think the rebound back is 100 million for the long term. Yeah.
So, as you talked in the 26 budget, we've proposed a budget issuance of 75 million, really to meet some of these large construction projects, in particular because we saw some large projects that are generational in nature and the potential of spreading that cost over time instead of existing ratepayer. We also thought it was a good time then to look, if we were going to go that route with these larger projects, to look at our Build America bond, the 2010 Build America bonds that are outstanding, see if we could refund those at the same time so we could mitigate some of those exposure to federal dollars on that program. So and when we look at our forecast, we do plan out for bonding as we see projects tick up. And 2 years ago, we had it in our budget too, and we looked at it at the time. The market wasn't good, and we were able to, with sequencing of capital, not issue the debt at that time. So once again, we would look to the market, see what's going on. If we decided we wanted to go, we'd bring that forward for approval, and then we'd also would look at that refunding with the 20 bonds.
I am really, at first, when you were talking about the $75 million bond, I just didn't have a feeling for the level of thought and consideration and analysis that you had done. But by asking questions and hearing you speak about it more has really helped me appreciate the level of work that goes into these major financial decisions. So thank you for your patience.
So, so this slide shows the average monthly rate per household for the combined center sewer and swim rate for 26, based on the scenarios of 4%, 3%, 2%, or 1% rate increase. So you can see there, at 4%, it's $67.65. Annual increase of $31.80 for an average household. 3% would be $66.95 a month, or $23.40 annually for the full increase. 2% at $66.30 per month, annually impact of $15.60, and a 1% increase of $65 with $7.80, excuse me, per year for the household. When you look at that, the difference and variance by increases, it's small in relation.
Yeah, that comes through. Quick question about how you defined average household, because every program is different. Do you just take the general cost over the number of households and do the average that way, or is there a particular characteristic?
Yeah, and under our current billing, so it would be a single family resident, so 1 EDU, 1 ESU, and for the winter water, 8 CCF. That's what we use in our system average. Although as
8 cubic.
It's like 750 gallons a thing or something, approximately that. It's.
Cubic.
I'm surprised it's that high though.
You know, and I think our
Higher than.
yeah. So when we looked recently, I believe it is under the 8 at this point, and so actually the impact to a household would be less than that.
Okay.
But it's calculated on 8.
Yeah, these examples are 8.
And they're consistent across.
Right.
Yes.
So you get the percentages.
Okay. At some point in the conversation, and I've just thought to myself, I'll wait till the end, but I also want to have the reminder of if we don't go with, well, both if we go with the 4%, how that maintains flexibility moving forward, but also if we go below that 4%, what are the risks and benefits? It's risk and benefits to everything. And so I would benefit from that discussion after we have this complete recap.
So this is just showing you the average household monthly rate, sanitary and swim, at a 4% annual increase from 26 through 33. So those are what you see in our forecast.
And one of the things that I gained out of reading the full CIP and sticking with it and really trying to understand each of the explanations, and I learned a lot. The number of pumps and fans, it's the movement of material is simply amazing. The mixing and whatnot, that demands power. And you look for optimizations everywhere. How can we take advantage of the heat and use that elsewhere in the process? But it helps me appreciate how over the course of time, we have to look at what this volume is going to cost me now versus into future years. I'm probably on average still flushing the toilet the same number of days, taking the same number of showers over the course of time, year over year. But in order to manage that material, it just takes energy. So thank you.
So these are the rates that are currently in our forecast. And they're the basis of when we look at CIC spend and debt issuance. We are right now in the process of finalizing our cost of service study, doing that allocation of costs between the two utilities, Sandy and Swim, and also the regional and local component. Once we have that completed this fall, we're going forward, then we get collecting EDU information from the cities and calculate new rates. Those will be the basis then of our new forecast going forward.
So we need to put that on the work plan to take us through and appreciate the learnings from that. So for our CWS rolling agenda set.
And we definitely, once we have those allocations and the rates, we'll be presenting those to the board and to the cities for transparency.
Thank you.
So this somewhat speaks to Chair Harrington's question with regards to impacts when you don't do the forecasted or planned rate increase. So the 10-year annual average increase in combined sanitary sewer and stormwater management rate is 3.5%, as you see here, over between 2017 and 2026. So that includes the 4% increase planned for 2026. So this has been in line with inflation, which has been at in that same time period at 3.3%. This trending reflects the district's adopted policy of reasonable rate increases on an annual basis to promote predictability for the customer and revenue stability for the district. And the district provided rate relief in 2021 in response to the pandemic. And a planned rate increase of 3.38% was deferred during that time period. Based on that deferral, the district projected rate increases several years ahead in the forecast and had implemented. And we had planned that increase would actually. So when you looked and you didn't do that deferral, and you plan out, we were thinking before we did the deferral that our increases were going to be about 3.8% going forward. But when we saw this trajectory, we were thinking it was going to be more like 5.5% in our forecast. However, as we sequenced labor adds, sequenced capital, we were able then to go in and do just moderate adjustments in 22. We bumped up just about 4.5%, and then we're able to trajectory down to about 4.13% over the next 4 years. So we were able to bring it back on track. But now what used to be an average 3% increase is now more like a 4% increase, and in the future could be a 5% or more increase, in particular if you do adjustments related to the rates in any given year.
So you always have to watch it.
And this is one you've seen a few times, but it just reiterates the blue line is Clean Water Services, our joint sanitary and storm rate over time compared to other local water utilities over the past 10 years. And the comparison shows how significant capital investments can result in the need to spike rates to cover debt and capital investments. The district has built reserves over time to help stabilize rates and avoid spikes to meet capital investment needs. Final slide I have for you today. This is showing for the 25-26 budget projected revenues based on a 4%, 3%, 2%, 1%, or 0 increase. And it's showing you just the rate reduction in that year. And we talked earlier about that cumulative impact. So I would just say at the 0, it's a $7.5 million adjustment to revenue in that year. 1% would be 5.6 million, 2% 3.7 million, and 3% 1.8 million adjustment to revenue.
Okay, so I'm not sure what slide to reference per se. Perhaps the rate revenue and fund balance one. Because what I'm thinking about is you made study investments in the East Basin Master Plan so that we have a better idea of how growth will be accommodated, how that affects the Durham treatment plan especially. And then with the West Basin Master Plan, I was impressed that the size of West Basin is bigger, but it touches on Rock Creek, Hillsborough, and Forest Grove, and also includes that's where more reserves are land use wise versus there's still UGB expansion. Well, there's capacity within the recently expanded UGB, say in King City and still in the River Terrace areas, but those have been considered with the East Basin Master Plan. So what I'm wondering about, Rick and Kathy, I'm assuming you'll be the two experts to help me get my head around this. Um, I can see how this 5-year CIP master plan has all those considerations in them already. And the West Basin master plan will be bringing more in to be programmed in. And so that's where, when I look at these possibilities of not going with the 4%, I'm then beginning to think, well, wait a second, that may involve risk that we can't keep up with development needs that exist. And so I'm really feeling ahead of my skis here, that while it may feel comfortable from a customer experience, for the longer term, it feels risky to me. And this is where I appreciate, Vice Chair Treese, that you've been advocating for us to go back and take a new look at the low income program and so forth. Anyway, I'm blabbing on about things I'm asking for help on. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, a couple things. In not doing the rate increase, it would we would sequence projects then. So we would have to make decisions about priorities and spending on projects. It also could be that we issue debt, and it might be then at a not as favorable an interest rate, depending on what our rating related to it. So yeah, those would be key things we would look at.
And can you remind me when we have new permit phases? We've been in, wasn't it like a couple of years ago?
I think we're about 18 months from our next permit renewal. But we're already 18 months, I believe,
About 18
From-
to 24 months.
today.
So it comes in the middle of 27, 28, or?
Yeah.
Oh, so this graph by itself, if we're already there, I drew an arrow between 27, 28, and then, and then went 5 more years out, and we're smack dab between FY 32 and 33. Okay. I hadn't thought about that. Those are the unknowns.
And one thing to take away too from this particular graph is it's showing that even with, so 1 year, no rate increase, 4% in out years, you're showing on that very first dotted line, our reserves are down to operating in that year.
Okay.
I'd like to bring up a question, and maybe, and Jason, if I can just
Sure.
put this out there for us to talk about. It wasn't that long ago that we looked at this forecast and said, this makes sense. And I think the impetus behind talking about these different scenarios was generated around the situation that we're in from just
Media presence.
a media presence, a
Public
public perception,
optics.
all those things. So I'm just trying to say to myself, okay, if that hadn't happened, if we weren't there, would we just be signing off on a regular 4% increase that we had previously agreed to?
I would be.
Yeah, I think I would be too. And so I'm trying to weigh the value proposition here in relationship to what we had said we were going to do, what we were planning for, and versus what we gain here. And I think it's important to have that discussion and as part of moving forward, because I know several of us have said no rate reductions, 2%, whatever. And I just want to frame up why we're even here today with this discussion.
Let me offer a little bit of an alternative or a thing to consider with that. And I want to challenge us as a board and frankly the leadership team to think about what it would look like to try to get on a long-term trajectory that would be sustainable with a 3% increase. Part of why is I think 4% compounded over the long term is really challenging for people, even with a program to support lower income folks. And I think 3% is something that in the long, so part of me saying that is to say, I'm not saying don't make the capital investments. It might mean we have to innovate and do things differently. It's a way of pushing the team, both the leadership team, the operations team, to think differently, figure out how to operate incrementally a little bit more efficiently, and then therefore be able to deliver a sustainable, what I think is more of a sustainable long-term rate of increase. And I would be much more comfortable with that. As I thought about this, let's just do, the sort of criticisms from the public that, hey, you're all obviously spending more than you need to. That's been in the media. You should not authorize any kind of a rating. I mean, these are all sort of public comments we've gotten. You've all heard them. There's certainly pressure from some spaces to do that. I'm not typically moved dramatically by those things if I don't think they're the right thing to do. I don't think that 0% is the right thing to do when I'm looking at all this information, but I have to be honest. In the long run, I don't think 4% is either. And so I guess I would just say, I would feel, maybe I'm issuing a little bit of my own personal challenge to the team to think differently about, could we, if it were going to be 3% and that was a long-term trajectory, how would you run this business differently? Yes, you might have to face projects differently, but can you innovate 1% out of the cost structure every year in a sustainable way to deliver that more, I think from an individual perspective, more sustainable rate increase trajectory. So I'll just offer that as a thought.
I guess I would also say that a lot of work went into looking at the projections around 4%, and I would, I don't know what we're buying with a 1% change, but I like the idea of.
Well, compounded, it
Yeah.
ends up being significant.
No, I understand when you look at the graph out long ways, but I also think that we need to look at, I framed it up as what's the media presence, what's our, what are we hearing from the public and their constituent reports, that type of thing. I also think that we need to be looking at the decision that we made on that 4% over time. We didn't have the information that we have today about costs and some of the other pieces that would have me asking, is that enough? Based on when we made these decisions, we weren't faced with some of the issues that we're faced with today with inflation and those types of things.
What would the leadership team think if the kind of the challenge I proposed, and maybe you need to think about it more, but what's your gut reaction?
But could we switch back to, slide 8? So if this is telling me looking backwards from 2017, 18, 19, the rate increase wasn't at 3.0%. It was in the 3.
Correct.
Yes.
So we've been.
I'm issuing a more aggressive challenge. There's no doubt about it. I'm asking you, what would you, if that were a parameter you were given, what would you do? And is it possible?
Yeah, I would look at sequencing the capital, priorities there. I would look at debt issuance and how you structure that to push some of that over time rather than direct rates. And we would develop a forecast that would include that in and see what it would look like.
You're not telling me it's immediately unworkable.
I think in the near future it is. I think in the
Unworkable
like
or
in the near future, so when we had some preliminary numbers come out of our cost of service study, they did show some larger rate increases in the first few years out and then leveling out to 3 in outer years. And it was really in relation to those capital projects. So I do think there is some rate impact that will come from these projects, but that there is an ability to level that out. And you can level that out through
Yeah.
capital project debt.
If we go to slide
Longer.
5, it's because we have this higher level of capital intensive, right? She's talked about how we have these two particular two capital intensive years. And so we've got a bit of a double whammy here, where it looks to me like there is a need, but your challenge makes sense when I look further out in time.
Well, and I'll be honest, I have a little bit of trouble given what I know about the organization and how it's been operating, to think that you cannot innovate 1% out of your cost structure. I'm having a little bit of trouble with that.
I think we always love a challenge. So what we need to do is explain what that means in terms of deferrals. So we can defer things. What tends to happen if you defer over a long period of time, if you're not keeping up with your asset and your renewal and replacement and where we're at, there's ways to quantify how your risk might change. So we can get to that point. We don't have that answer quite yet.
And I'm just one
But
person.
we would like to give that information. I think that's, good stuff to talk about. I will say this, as far as the innovation, our rates, we do have that chart where we compare our rates to others.
Yep.
We are at the bottom of the chart. The only place beating us does not have our limits. So I don't want to back away from that challenge at all. That's in our DNA.
But you think you're doing a pretty good job.
But I do want to point that out, that I think if we weren't innovating today, we should be the most expensive on that chart in some respects. You could argue that. So I think it's important. I think we have the right now the tools to do that type of innovation, and we can continue to look for those opportunities. I think there's efficiencies internally and operationally that we can also be looking at, but the way costs are increasing so much, and just some of the potential regulatory pieces. But we should look at it, and we can do that. But I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture without giving you the information to understand what the trade-offs might be. And what we don't want to do is end up having to spike those rates at some point.
I should be clear, I don't want that either, and that's not what I'm suggesting.
So I guess what I would say is trying to go the direction that I think everybody else is. We're not going to let the tail wag the dog here and make a decision that's going to cost the organization $7 million to respond to public outcry. At the same time, when before this scenario happened, what was the complaint that I heard from very, very few? Because I mean, the taxpayers look at their bill, they don't understand their bill. They blame the cities generally for their bill rather than seeing that it is two different organizations. And so that's part of the public relations that we need to get beyond. But it's headcount and, quite frankly, CEO's compensation. So if we begin to deal with what we hear as the complaint rather than reacting to a negative situation, then I think we're beginning to address the issue. Okay, because if we look at that chart that Diane provided, I guess, for the budget process of headcount growth over the last 5 or 6 years, it's pretty doggone significant. And then we're gonna add 4 more this year, and I think part of your challenge at the budget meeting was, it's a 2 and a -2. The net sum 0. We're gonna reduce operating expenses by 2%. We're gonna give you a 2% bump. What does that look like? And I think that's part of, but also I will throw one more thing in there, and that is our reserves. And every one of us sitting around this table says we got to have those reserves. We're not going to reduce those reserves, because we can see from that, looking out into the future, we got to have those kinds of reserves if we want to maintain and sustain the system that we have. So, and I think that's part of our responsibility as a board, to be able to communicate. No, to justify, we need those kinds of reserves to do this.
Because people relate that, like that situation in their own personal life, that'd be like the equivalent of someone having $5 million in their checking account and then going and taking a car loan to buy a car. Like it does not compute, is I guess what I'm sharing. Like it does not make sense to people that you would do that.
But
But
it
we've
also
got those size reserves.
But they also don't understand what it costs to
Yeah.
maintain this system. I mean,
Totally. I don't think
see
they're
that.
comparable situations, but that is how
Yeah.
individuals think about it.
So yeah, I think we got flex in here. I appreciate you pointing that out, Jason. But yeah, I think we got some flex that we could do in there and not be showing the kinds of decline that we're showing in that particular one, or even worse, the one where we drop below the next slide.
And that's with no bond issue.
Yeah, and so that's a situation that we don't want to go to. So we got to find something in there that I guess is actually fun, but not be too punitive.
Do we know the cost impact of, and I'm really talking in generalized terms here, of an affordable rate program? Do you have any idea?
No, I mean, that's a big.
Well, we've been over this.
Yeah.
Over the last 4 years or so.
Right.
And what we had difficulty with is that there would be, we're subsidizing from one area to
Another.
another. And it really felt that we were getting ourselves into a fairness. So we should take a relook at that topic. I'm not saying necessarily that exact information, and engage, because if on the drinking water side, if there isn't an existing low income program, then why are we looking at it on the sewer side by itself? So that thought hadn't occurred to me back when we were talking about that topic years ago. So I think it's worth relooking at for sure. Another idea that struck my brain over the last couple of days is that we have all this combined billing, and so any of our community communication, we're lucky to have it, right? And so I thought, maybe one of the things we should think about doing is every household has a postal code and a post box. So what if once a year you have a CWS mailing, just like the cities do for their different community programs? Our community program is, we're going to tell you more about clean water services. A little bit of the education part, a little bit of, this is not just waste treatment, but there's a lot of pipes and pump stations and whatnot, stuff that we totally take for granted. And it would just, that customer contact just would become part of our normal operation. So, maybe we need to make some changes you've been trying to do least cost approach, right? Social media, leverage where people are. But maybe we just have to think about the fact that just being out of sight, out of mind isn't good enough. And whereas in prior decades, we could look at smaller percentage of changes over time. I think one of the phrases we heard, it sounds to me like from the prior graphs, whereas we're in the 3% range now because of the level of complexity, technology, and everything, we're in the land of the fours. Whereas we would be in the land of the threes before. And it's just that inflection point of complexity. And it's a lot to get my head around. Um, I, um, I don't have a problem in challenging the organization to try to innovate and whatnot. What I have a problem with is the timing of that. I would much prefer to have the agency have the opportunity to incorporate that into future plans versus disrupt the things that we have underway to make sure that we're able to continue to perform under our current permit and lay the building blocks for the next successful one or two. So
I think
more study needed.
I think leaders and organizations step up when forced to figure things out. So I don't want to leave the organization in a difficult position, but I do think that sometimes innovation comes and creativity comes from the tension of being forced to figure it out.
And that's
I'll
what
leave it
we
at
did with the cost of service study too. There are some things that we still have underway that we haven't necessarily had the opportunity to go over with you as a member of the board. We have some things that have been underway for a year or two that are still in progress. Um, I think we've got to spend more time to sync up on those things.
I think that any adjustment to the plan rate will definitely have an impact on the future rates that we would propose to meet the capital program.
I don't know, Jerry, where do you think you ended up?
Well, I'm kind of looking at numbers here. So our budget, our operating budget is $200 million. I can't remember what the real numbers are, but it looks to me like here it's 200 million. Is that what that means?
139.
139.8.
In 27.
And so,
When you forecast, when you're looking at 2033, that would be about 220 million. It
okay.
doubles every 10 years.
Okay, so, but what that says to me is that we got $200 million in revenues coming in currently projected, and that's with the 4% increase. Okay, which equates to about $7.7 million. Okay, so, and we're spending 140 and then there's this 90% spend versus 100% spend, so it's 10%. So anyway, playing with all kinds of numbers, we're actually adding to our capital fund, but then we're spending that pretty rapidly. So there's a contrast there. So okay.
Yeah. And debt service added into that.
So I guess I'm still going back to what Jason said at the budget meeting. What if we cut that 2%? What would that look like? Well, 2% of 140 is 2.8. So what would a 2.8 reduction in operating expenses look like? We give you a 2% rate bump. Your net sum zero theoretically, okay? And we don't lose ground
In one year.
Yeah.
Next year, that's not in our base any longer. And the costs have gone up.
I get the multiplication, right?
Yeah.
You and I had this
Yeah,
conversation, and I acquiesced, you were right and I was wrong. So,
Rare admission.
Did I just hear you propose 2% cut in your operations and a 2% cut in capital?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, 2% cut in operations, a 2% increase in rate, which
Huh? Yeah.
theoretically is a net sum
Well,
zero.
down from 4%.
Right? And that allows us to maintain our surplus for capital projects.
Yeah, but you'd have to cut heads for a 2% operational
Yeah,
cut,
you would,
like in 30-day notice.
yeah.
I do not,
I don't know what that looks like. That's all I was asking.
and we also
And I
have Teamster
presented that
labor
as
agreements.
a conceptual way to think. I think it's a helpful way to think about the overall long-term financial position of the organization and how to balance budgets with rates and
Well, because we're looking at the 4%, 3%, 2%, 0%, only at the top line. Or that's just a revenue side of things. We're not talking about, well, what if we reduce our
Correct.
expenses to help offset?
well, that's the point I was making with the 3%. Like, what would
When you
you
look
do
at-
to,
When you look at the head count over the last 5 years, that
It's
might
been very
suggest
slow
that
growth.
there might be some in there. Well, Washington County, we have reduced $99 million out of our general fund budget over the last 5 years, whereas you guys have significantly, well, I would say you guys, Clean Water Services has done exactly the opposite.
the board's been part of that.
Hmm?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
board's been part of that.
But I also think that it's been very planful on the county
Yeah,
side.
yeah, yeah.
And there's been a long horizon with an understanding of what our budget hole is going to be and being able to adjust for that. And even with that horizon, it's been tough. So I'm suggesting that for an immediate decision, I don't think I don't think that for this next rate increase, you can just cut like that because we're not prepared to
No, if we
address
did it
the
this
issue.
year, we'd have less savings going into the
Right. Now, I'm
savings
not
account,
saying
so
that
to
you
speak.
couldn't look and balance on a forward-looking basis, but I really would not be comfortable with doing it right now.
No, I would agree, and that's a very good point. This is too short line for talking about a reduction in headcount, so I get that.
Mhm.
But maybe looking out into the future, certainly at
Maybe it's the right challenge for a year or 2 or 3 out.
26, 27, maybe be looking at that. I don't know, I don't know. I don't like thinking that a decision we make today though has a $35 million impact over this time frame. I don't like that either. So
So what it tells me is that it feels to me like a 4% rate increase is the responsible thing for leading into this next fiscal year with following up on evaluating a low income rate program, looking at we've got to be able to, as a board, better understand what gains we're getting. And this is in addition to your following up on the $75 million bond. It's not lost on me. There's work there, okay? But being able to articulate what achieving this level of CIP investment for 25, 26, what the level of CIP investment is for 26, 27, beyond saying, well, it builds out the East Basin Master Plan, and it means I have to read a one pager, right? And understand that for this chart, it's XYZ. For this bar, it's ABC, right? You've also done a good job of reminding us that the West Basin Master Plan is in the horizon. and we have a big improvement in technology for the lab, which works on, a huge level of samples every single year for the current permit, and really taking a look at how we set up certain budget principles and priorities into future years. And I also, in having a conversation with Rick last week after the budget meetings and leading up to today's meeting, Clean Water Services has been a premier utility, operation wise, but also science wise. And it will be useful for us to think about future planning scenarios and what effect that has not only on financial flexibility, but permit flexibility and science flexibility. And I can't characterize it any differently than that.
So I want to just be clear that I'm comfortable with trying to, I don't think a 3% decision this year and signaling that we want to plan around that for long-term sustainability. I don't think that means we have to cut FTEs this year. I think it means a little bit less money going into the savings account as we're getting ready to spend capital down. I'd like to see that. I just want to share with the other 4 members of the board that I may vote no on a 4% increase just because I would prefer to see that be the approach, and I just don't want everybody to be surprised by that.
But I want to say, like, the challenge you offered to the staff, I think that's worth challenge for you to go back and do that homework, because when I review this material to prep for this meeting, you really do, again, do a good job of telling the story of why we need this 4%. That's not lost in any of this board members. So you do a good job. There's the public perception. We can't ignore that because the 5 of us are elected by the public, and what they say and what they request matters to us. But that doesn't mean we do not insist on the responsibility upon us to the district. So I want to support the challenge Commissioner Snyder offered to you all to say, go back and see if you can finagle something and come back. And if the answer is no, we'll do our due diligence and we'll still, insist on our responsibility and vote accordingly. But I think it's worth for you to take that challenge and come back that story of what a 3% looks like without reduction to staff.
And my challenge is a little different than that.
Well,
It's what would you do? Like, how would you make it work if that was what you were given? Not does it or doesn't it, but what would it look like? Unless you literally say this can't be done. But I don't, given the numbers involved, I really doubt that's the answer.
The hard for me to answer is the impact in the future, as we're so close to having that cost service study and the new rate development there. It's going to have a lot better answers and the ability to plan out some of these capital.
The timing
is not the best
got it.
for us.
Criticism received.
But I like your idea, and I hope that we can.
And this is only the second phase of that cost of services study. It's built off of the first phase, and from a board perspective, I don't feel like we got a lot out of the first level of the cost of service.
I would agree with that. We need
So,
the second version.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we were informed about what it was, but in terms of how it could help us with business positioning, I mean, it was a foundational piece, and now, yeah. But I also have to disagree with you on the timing, Commissioner Snyder or Director Snyder, that we can't enter a proposed fiscal year this late in the game and say, oh no, we're gonna do it feels like a switcheroo on me. as opposed to when we look at the fiscal forecasting for the county's budget, we're doing that in October, November, December. And look at gaps then. We don't do it, the week before, the budget adoption.
To that point, I was going to ask if you would think about if we were to stay at 4% this year, but give direction to budget process for next year
Yep.
to be flat or a reduction, so that we can.
3% trajectory would be what I would be trying to target.
Okay,
for the
but
long
what I'm
We
saying,
haven't been operating at 3% for a very long time.
and
I
I'm
know,
saying that
that's a good challenge. Figure out how to innovate some.
Well, we may not be able to reach it, is my point. We may
my
be in the
point was to-
3 range.
my point is to build it into a process
Yes.
where we accomplish what you're talking about with in a manner that isn't a little head chopped off, kind of running around trying to find the pots of money versus doing it in a thoughtful, planful way, so we can look carefully at what the relationship with capital is, what the relationship to the operational side is, but it would be in our direction opportunity to say that this is what we want next year.
So we've got more than $450 million in the savings account, right? Generally speaking.
Doing utility reserves policy, not government reserves policy.
So $450 million in the savings account, and the 1% difference for next year, if the rate increase were 3%, would be
175.
okay, 1.75 million. Okay, so I think that's important consideration here, like to put it in perspective.
And you're suggesting take it out of reserve.
Well, that's what the net thing would happen, is there'd be a little less money put into the capital, into the capital account, is what would, that's the net impact.
Without touching the operating side.
I mean, that's what would happen unless there's other adjustments made. I would suggest the team be figuring out if they can innovate so that you do get the money, you do get that into your savings account ultimately by not spending it on operations. All this money is put in, my understanding of the way the budgeting is done, it's all put in, like, it's all in one big account, so to speak.
By fund.
So how about I suggest, Kathy, how about just to add to your 1%, 1.75 thing, we freeze 4 positions.
Freeze what?
Freeze the 4 new positions.
I don't want to be that directive to a brand new acting CEO. I mean, to me, innovation to the team means figure it out. Maybe
How
they.
critical is the 4 positions?
Well, they're proposed.
Down
They're
30.
Yeah, come on. I think
They're
that
what?
they're proposed, they've been thoughtful, they've been planned out. I think it's pretty arbitrary at this point to say,
I was asking the question.
and I'm answering.
I just don't want to.
I didn't ask you.
I want to give the leaders flexibility.
So pull out your budget file on your computer and do the search. Could we step back on reserves first? Because I'm still trying to understand your proposal. On page 117 of the proposed budget, it lists out the 4 funds that make up the reserves. The liability reserve fund, the sanitary sewer capital replacement fund, the surface water management capital replacement fund, the sanitary capital reserve fund, and the surface water capital reserve fund. So what you're proposing is to reduce overall out of all of these funds, cumulatively $5.6 million. So still move forward with the full CIP and the full operating fund, but fund those things out of a dip in reserve for 1 year. Did I hear that
I think
proposal?
it's only 1.75
It's
million
1.75.
total.
I'm gonna get you 5.
That's all That'd be between all four of those.
All 4%
I took-
7 million.
I took it off of slide 10.
Oh, yeah, 5 point.
Oh, I see. No, that was a
1.8.
full 1% increase as opposed to it's 1.8
Yes.
million.
Yeah.
But that was your proposal.
Close to
Well, I'm just making the point that like on a $450 million overall amount of money that the public would say we're,
Yeah.
you know, we have in a savings account or more than one, multiple funds. We're talking about $1.8 million.
Mhm. So, I'm trying to understand, just in general, what that kind of reduction in the reserve might introduce.
That's the 1.8. And so if you're talking about adjusting the revenue side
Mhm.
in that 1 year,
Mhm.
that 1.8 is 17.9 million in 2030. So it has an impact.
I'm aware of that.
Over those years.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it might be easy to find, you know, or utilize some of those reserves the first year, but if you're talking about continuing to utilize reserves to meet that over time,
Oh, that's where the challenge comes.
what happens if there isn't that to be found?
You go back to 4.
I mean, then we got to reevaluate that, but
Mhm.
I don't think unless you are, like, why has the county organization had to get the way it has? It's been forced to.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be realistic about it. It was forced to figure it out. I'm suggesting there may be a similar path here that's maybe less painful.
I mean, I'm committed to, as we go forward with the cost of service study and look at the rates, I'm committed to find cost savings in there. And if we can develop a plan that in out years says at 3%, I'm for it. But we need the time to plan that.
Sure.
And
I get that.
identify the optimal staffing, and capital program.
And that's where I'm coming from. Yep. Because what you're describing is a different financial scenario than the way we've been operating. That's all.
True.
And my mind is open to that.
Mhm.
Just not right.
But
Not
I
at
think-
this moment.
Turning on a dime,
Yeah.
no. It's the when do you incorporate that? And if we go back and look at the work session learning days that we've had over the last year, we weren't engaged for the budget planning and the financial plan. So, you know, we'll be redoubling our efforts, essentially. The other point I wanted to come back to was the point on public perception. Public perception is not homogeneous and not monolithic. So, yes, there are a few people, some people is the word I've been using, the phrase, that have expressed concerns, but there are a whole lot that haven't, who, you know, who trust and whatnot. So I'm trying to make sure that in my decision making, that I'm able to be thoughtful, not disregarding those concerns, but also don't just have a knee-jerk reaction. That's all. So in terms of overall next steps, I think with where we are, this proposed budget only has an increase of 4 very specific FTE with the capital needs that are very well documented and the operational goals, and we can re-review those together. We have the low income program, and we have a desire to come back and make sure we establish the budget process overall and what level of scenario planning we want to go through, as well as things that are in the works already, the cost of service study. I need to look myself at the latest billing information as well and see what people are able to glean there. And I think we're going to have to invest a little bit in more community understanding of what they're getting in these monthly bills.
So what I'm hearing is we have a projection, that graph that shows the changes over time. What you would like to see is that's assuming the status quo. So you're challenging the team to develop efficiencies and savings. So if we do a reduced rate, we don't actually realize that reduction in reserves.
Correct.
We don't have that.
Correct.
We don't have that hypothetical on there yet. And that is something we would like to do. We're happy to do. It takes a little time to give you that information, but I understand that. And I think that's a good approach as a way to look at it. We're not locked into losing those reserves if we're able to find some innovation and efficiencies. So that makes sense to me. My preference would be I think the FTE question we've talked about a bit, so I'd like to just address it for a minute. I do believe we have some vacant FTEs. We have some vacant higher level FTEs. We have some ideas on maybe we don't need some of. So rather than say don't do those four for next year, I think we can look at what we have overall and likely do as good as what you would see long term in terms of FTE costs for this initial year of those four folks. But I would want to go and look at the whole picture. Would be my ask. Is not to
That's a good point.
give me the number. Give me a number. I'm
This is why I don't want to lock them into.
yeah.
details.
I think I can find the best use of the FTE budget and the ads, and we've got thoughts and ideas on that already. And I'm
We
anxious
also
to get
had,
some of
as a
those.
board, visibility into weaknesses on the administrative side
Mhm.
that we need to look at. And we know very well from Washington County experience what it means to keep ignoring the administrative side.
So where are we from a messaging for as regards to the budget that's gonna come forth? For approval? So what have you heard, Kathy, what are we gonna do?
What we're going for on June 17th with our proposed rates and charges that are included in the plan document at this point, and the approved budget, and the approved budget coming forward for adoption.
Will it be separate items?
Yes, so they'll be separate actions.
Still a very lean budget, has only adding in 4 new FTE, which I think is a historic low over the last few years. Has also a whole bunch of reductions with regard to administration of the food and travel expenses as well. So, yeah, I think there are some compares and contrasts compared to prior budgets.
I guess I have to ask a question, Jason. You heard what we're gonna be brought forward is a 4% fee increase for 4 new positions. I heard you say earlier that you're not sure you could support that, so it's very important to me that we have board consensus, so.
Given the discussion that's happened, I don't think consensus is realistic at this point. But I'll have to think long and hard about it, but I probably would not support the 4%.
So what would you?
3.
Okay.
With the challenge.
Okay.
And knowing that there may be work that's done over the next year or two that would move my thinking on that. I mean, I'm not someone that doesn't learn, like can't take in new information or learn things. I hear our soon to be new acting CEO indicating that, he thinks there's ways that there may be efficiencies that are available. I think that to me, I'm making a $1.8 million decision in this space, not a $17.9 million decision, because we will be making decisions every year and we have to react to conditions and what's going on. And so that's how I'm approaching it. But if you must have a 5-0 vote, I don't know that you're going to get that.
We don't have to have a 5-0 vote. It's always,
Well, you,
Good.
you wanted consensus.
I love consensus. Yeah, that's why I asked the question. So
I understand.
I think I'm actually leaning your direction on the 3% versus the 4%. So I don't, now I'm, conundrum
I just think that's irresponsible at this stage of the game.
to do a 3% versus 4%.
Yeah, at this stage of the game, you bet.
We're talking about this for a month and a half. Kathy has known for at least a month that the 4% was in jeopardy.
I mean, some people were giving messaging to you that it could be 0%.
Be 0.
I know that because I was not the only one who made that comment. Yeah. So it's not an entire surprise, I guess.
That's right. It's not a surprise.
Just that over the course of a year, I don't think this is responsible fiscal planning. That's my point.
Well, I think we better come to a direction that we are in this work session to give staff at this point in time as to what we expect them to bring so that this thing doesn't implode on delivery.
It sounds like it's 4. I mean, what I've gotten out of the conversation is that they're going to bring 4%.
Bring forward,
I think
okay,
we,
so
I think we have the opportunity to ask. Rick mentioned earlier, and I thought I saw heads nodding, that there might be some high level opportunities that you could identify that could help us look toward a 1.8 without going to capital. Am I right about that? And that information could come to us before the 17th. Am I right about that? Or no?
That'd be fast.
I know it's fast.
FTE savings. It would be FTE.
And it would be unfilled FTE positions. Is that what you're talking about?
I think it would be more multi-pronged than just that particular.
Or what?
I think it would be more multi-pronged than just the FTE to get to the full 1.8. So what I was suggesting was there was 4 FTEs added. That would not be equivalent to 1.8. That I can off the top of my head rattle off some things that I think we might find some efficiencies at that level. So I wouldn't want, but I did not mean to state, oh, we've got 1.8 in FTEs sitting there ready to roll. We'd have to look for some.
actually what I heard, Rick, I'm sorry, is that I think you have over 40 vacant positions right now.
We do.
And so that seems that there might be some squeeze in there rather than the 4 that we've got. So we add the 4 and we squeeze the rest. We'll take that 1.8 out of there or something like that. But that's the kind of messaging that I would like to have come back. I'm tending to agree with Jason on this. I'm not sure I can go with the 4, but I can go with the 3 and some of that offset.
I don't know that we would have specific positions at that point.
No,
In 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't have that expectation, but
What do you have to submit a proposed budget to the state?
But what we would do if you came back and we did the rate hearing first and then decision was made to do it at 3 rather than at 4, we are committed at the district that we would work within that dollar amount in that impact and looking at, like we have in past, of sequencing capital and sequencing labor. We do.
okay, that's great. I can deal with that.
So to the chair's point as well, we've had a plan in place and agreed to this 4% ramp, if you will, over time. So and I'm thinking, okay, why now? What is the impetus for the reduction of 1% at this point in time? And is it public? It's fine if it's public perception. It's fine. I'm just trying to figure this
For
out.
me, this is the first time I'm being involved in that conversation. So
Okay, well, so
there's a little bit of a timing thing for me in that too.
so I understand that you haven't been involved in the past discussions, but 4 of us have been.
Yep.
And I'm not diminishing your viewpoint of 3%. I understand that. I'm just trying to get my head around a, a, a change that we've had in place for a while in a quick manner when we would have the opportunity to relook at this over the course of at least a year for further discussion. Now, that doesn't mean that we couldn't taking into consideration public perception, a 3% for 1 year, with the understanding that we were going to go back and revisit all of the plans that we put into place for this 4% increase over time. Because I'm frankly really uncomfortable with just abandoning what the strategy has been and in this moment. And while I understand that, Jason, you come to the table and say, I think we could squeeze a percentage point out of this. Okay, but what was this made up of? So
Let me ask you a question. Do you know more about the level of efficiency and operations of the organization now than you were a year ago, as far as how efficiently the organization is operated? Because that's a major consideration for me. I might have had a different
that's a
opinion.
fair question.
I may have had a different opinion if I were you a year ago too. Like I may have had a different thought.
That's a fair question, but I think my impression of efficiency within the organization is highly colored by a flare-up of events that we're dealing with at this particular point in time. And I don't want to be overly influenced by that based on the strategy that we put into place over time. So yes, I'm frustrated with efficiencies.
I don't want to be overly influenced by that either. I'm giving it small amount of consideration.
Okay, so all I'm saying is I could go with 3% if the understanding was that this was to address the current issues, and we would come back to the discussion about what quantified the 4% increase over time and how does that compare if we were to move forward with a 3% reduction.
They're a viable path.
So I'm saying I'm not comfortable throwing out the work that, again, 4 of us have been involved with over time, as well as staff here, frankly, and a lot of staff time. So, but I am willing to think about this. I'm just not willing to jump to a steady state.
I didn't suggest a steady state necessarily.
So maybe I didn't understand that I thought when you said 3%, you were looking toward the future of a 3% ramp.
That was the challenge. Like, what would it look like? Is that possible? But I am not immune to new information or deeper analysis done and looking at, the group coming back and Mr. Shanley, if he's in the role at the time, saying, or whoever's in the role saying, this really isn't workable and this is why. I have, given my experience and what I've seen, I find that a little hard to believe, but I would believe it. I mean, if that's what is coming back a year from now.
And what goes into my decision here or thoughts here is also the comments that Rick made about the fact that we are, in the scheme of things, a low rate provider.
Yeah.
So how does that influence what our strategy was? And I think it did to a great deal. So I'm just saying that this picture that we're looking at is just in time, and we need to really go back and look at our strategy and why we looked at this increase in terms of our capital investments as well as what our ratepayers were absorbing.
I mean, if I didn't say what I said today, we possibly wouldn't be having a conversation about whether there could be more
No question.
financial innovation or cost.
No question.
So, I mean, to me, I think the board has an obligation to do that.
And I also think that we have an obligation to remind ourselves why we did do what we did.
I think there's actually more going on here as well. this board has never before been this engaged on the CWS budget. Okay. We currently have 20, 40. We have almost 50 unfilled positions across the agency as of March 31st. So we've never had information on what the unfilled rate was if we take a similar org chart from 2 years ago, what has been the change in terms of unfilled. So I'm still back on the what if there was a reduction in reserves. Your previous answer was yes, it's 1.8 this year, but out, further years, 5 to 7 years, it's this amount of money. Well, we're stuck in the here now today. Forget what the cost of it is in the future. What I do appreciate is that the agency has taken a look at the current operations and identified that there are 4 additional positions that are needed in order to position the organization successfully. Could those 4 positions be accommodated through these almost 50 unfilled positions instead of increasing FTE? I don't know that because I don't know if that went into the kind of thinking for putting together this proposed budget, right? Or not. So it goes to one of our board members talking about the ZBB method and really taking a look at what does it take to operate year over year, and can there be some additional efficiencies? My mind is totally open in terms of scenario planning, but I don't think we had the level of engagement a month and a half ago on the budget that we do now, or even when the articles first started running at the end of March. And so that's where I'm concerned about potential disruption, or continued disruption where we've already got it in the workforce. I'm concerned about our retention rate on the current workforce, as well as the impact. It's one reason why I dove into the CIP this year much deeper than I did in my prior years of review of the CIP. And part of that's related to the East Basin Master Plan coming through to us as well. So it's not that I can't get to what something in the 3 range might be, but going from a full 4 to a flat 3 when we've been in at least the 3 ranges for a while is concerning to me. I just want to make sure that the organization, the leadership has had a chance to go through more scenario planning than it has been. So, if they can accommodate it through operating out of some amount of reserves for a year, and identifying a way to solve the need for the required 4 positions through that business case, it's really hard to pull that out of the current budget through searches right now, by the way. Then maybe I could get there at a 3%, but I don't have that information today. But we do have an approved budget with a 4%.
So there was a lot of discussion at the budget committee about that and the fact that we were going to be having this discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So now we have, so, um, who would like to take another crack at making a proposal, that we, because right now we're on a track for the adoption of a proposed budget with 4% June 17th. Is there an alternative that you would like to spearhead?
I will at least propose for the sake of discussion that we make a aspirational goal for the future of 3%, which means this year the rate increase would be 3%, though it would need to be reevaluated and plans and thorough analysis like the chair is asking for be done between now and next year to figure out whether there's a way for that to be the long-term path or not.
Can I add?
Sure.
And that the 1.8 reduction in fees from that 1% that would not come out of reserves, but be looked at in
What, wait, are we trying to define something for the future? Or are we trying to just, I'm trying to get a proposal on the table where for instead, we have option one right now, which is the proposed budget that was approved with a 4%. As well as are doing things differently that we talked about before with a budget process, low income program, and looking at the 3% ranges for rate increase.
Long-term.
Yes. But I heard you both speak, I heard you speak a minute ago about doing something short-term, but then you said it was long-term, so I'm confused.
No, it was not short, it was not long term, okay, and maybe I should have just stopped with,
No, I was pointing at him.
I know, but it was my addendum that messed
Added.
things up. The 1.8 million that is impacted by a 3% versus a 4% does not impact a reduction in reserves. We just stopped there. You guys figured it out.
You don't want to see it
I do
cause a
not wanna-
reduction in
I
reserves.
do
That's
not
what
wanna
you're
see a
saying.
reduction in
You want it
reserves.
driven out of operational costs.
Well, turn it over to them.
I will say with that, that we definitely could find some savings, but I couldn't guarantee we wouldn't use reserves because of the capital program in this spend that we would do.
Well, no, the capital program is gonna reduce reserves. I get that. I just.
But how do you say which one?
Which one was the effect?
Which one did it?
Which one?
That 1.8 we found, we lost it already then in the capital program. I guess the only thing, right? I guess you should show at the end of the year, okay, the proposed or the adopted budget was this, and this is what we spent. And oh, yeah, it's less than 1.8. So yeah, we found savings.
Jerry's making the point that dollars are fungible, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just want to say we're going to reduce reserves because I can't guarantee that in the capital spend we have in this year and next. Just
The reduction of reserves has to be focused on the capital spending, okay? Not on operations.
Commissioner Willie,
Sorry.
Director Willie.
Sorry,
Wait,
done now.
didn't you just switch? You went from it has to be out of capital and not out of operations.
No, I did not do that.
Hmm.
I said the reduction a year from now in capital reserves has to be as a result of capital projects.
Okay. So what does that do to this year's? What is the direction for a second scenario for this year? That's what I'm having difficulty with.
What are you hearing, Kathy?
that we will need to look at our operating budget and find some savings to make up 8 million.
That's what she said.
So that the rate increase this year would only be 3%.
Correct.
And can you do that and have a proposal for us to adopt? We somehow have to have a public hearing on this too, don't we?
I guess my preference would be that you would adopt the rate first and you identify that you're gonna do it at 3%. And then you adopt the, approved budget and we commit that we're working towards saving in the environment.
And adopt the approved budget as the budget committee approved budget because we've just reduced the fee income by $1.8 million.
So all your appropriated in budget is expenditures. So we would just go in and make sure when we go out, work through and we could even go in mid-year and do an adjustment to the budget and reduce revenue too.
Well, you know what we want, so
Mhm.
bring forth, Kathy.
I mean, this is just what I proposed. It sounds like you're
Alright.
you're seconding it, or?
Well, I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
We don't have a first or second here.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad. Good. This has been a long conversation.
Kathy and I have discussed whether.
Come on up to the table.
Kathy and I have discussed whether the budget committee has to come back, and we don't think so. It would only be if you had to, you were increasing the revenue in the budget, but decreasing, technically, there's nothing in the statute that says you'd have to have the budget committee come back again. Talk about it, and it's just like Kathy said, you just have to come up with reduced expenditure throughout the year, and it may be just a budget revision, mid-year budget revision.
I will be comfortable on with a couple caveats. And I think I've already outlined what they are, but I'm going to reiterate that, and Chair pointed out that we would be moving forward with the low income program design.
Well,
That's a
with
given.
it bringing to us to then approve.
That's what I said
We
with
need
the
that.
Given
design.
the direction, yes.
We need that no matter what.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's in there. The other piece is that I agree with, I think I agree with Jerry that it doesn't come out of capital.
It's hard for her to get that.
But I also do not want, where I might disagree, is that this, from my perspective, does not supersede the plan that we put in place last year unless we revisit that plan or the previous year. So we had a strategy for a 4% ramp and we had all sorts of pieces built into that. I'm not saying that that can't drop to 3%, but I think it has to be done thoughtfully and it has to be done with board input.
I think that's what we're.
That's what,
asking them
that's
to do.
exactly what
They've
Jason.
said they can do that.
Okay.
So what they told it, yeah, because this is consistent with the budget committee as well, because we asked Kathy, what if we approve the budget today, right? And she spoke about it being expenditures, but what if the board decides to pick between 0 and 4%? And her response was very simply, then we would have to spend it out of reserves. So what that was coming out of the budget committee. What you've said here is proceed with the capital. So hold capital at this level and see how, but approve a 3% rate, but see how through either keeping positions vacant, not proceeding with the execution of the 4 approved position, you can come up with the 1.8 million in savings.
Yes, and that we are not committed into the future to a 3%. We don't adjust the overall plan that we have to come
No,
back.
we're only
every year.
making decisions for one fiscal year.
We can
That's
do
what
that
we
for
do
one
every
fiscal
single year.
Well, I understand that, but I want to make sure that we revisit the work that was done previously and look at adjusting that as well. So that's another piece of work.
The future discussion about 3% is just simply aspirational.
Mhm.
I don't understand what that statement means.
Is it possible? What would it look like? What does it do? Future
We
discussion.
need a whole budget process that engages us. So what we've said is bring us one scenario that's only a 3% increase. That's all that is.
I think Kathy understands what it is that we're asking.
I agree.
And that's,
But it's not a statement of philosophy is my point.
I think the getting to the plan that is being described would be based on a philosophy.
We
possible.
we have processes that we've used every single year for board principles, board priorities. We've never applied that on CWS.
We definitely
And
should.
we've never had a rigorous budget process with CWS. And I noted that previously for us to create one.
so I've stated my concerns and my agreement levels.
I have a question for you. Would that be clear in the budget adoption process? Because all the materials have 4% now. So how do we?
Yeah, we would definitely,
Explain.
we would change all of the narrative related to the weights in there, because that's the, basis of the rates and charges of the year that we didn't do the work. It gets complicated, but yeah, we would do that.
We would want, to your point, Nikki, so we'd want to clearly communicate what it is that our intent was here. And so we can do that.
And then
They can do that.
the budget committee, would you let them know? Like, how do we, I feel like this is the first time where, for my presence here, I would speak. This is the first time that a budget committee approved the budget. We're not making a bit of adjustments. I feel like it's the right thing to do to let them, I mean,
You're talking about communicating back to the
budget committee,
That's
yeah.
Very simply done.
Yes,
Right.
yeah, it definitely.
They also fully expected us. to
Yeah.
have
That's
this
exactly
conversation.
right.
Yeah.
None of them are going to be surprised.
Committed to that.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
We will.
We talked about a 2 minus 2.
Yeah.
That's 0 on that. So, yeah. This will be a surprise.
So is there commitment of this board if we come forward next year with the cost service study done and it indicates that maybe we have to do a 5% or more, but it's justified, it's substantiated? Would you look at that?
Yes, look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll look at it.
Okay.
I would be challenging you all to figure out, I mean, I better be very robustly.
We're going to need
Analyzed.
to figure out some processes.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
board's going to have to commit to participate in these processes that we've never ever had before.
But good on you for bringing it forward.
Kathy, I would have expected nothing less from you to make sure that point was made.
So we'll
Heard.
be sure June 10th to bring you new processes that you need to commit to.
Good.
I didn't hear from Nafisa.
Yeah, I don't, I said,
All what she was asking about was communication related, not cost. So, okay. So you're going to be bringing some information back to us for us to review and be prepared for action on June 17th. Great. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
to
you.
Aaron as well.
Get
And
paid
Rick, thank you.
Yes.
time and a half for
For
the
the
last
clarification.
30 minutes.
So
Worked
Willie, send them.
worked overtime.
I know, dang it.
Just you though, not Joe.
Yeah.
Not Joe.
Willingness to-
So we've been going since 1 o'clock. Let's take our 15-minute break and come back at 10 minutes to 4.
We only got like 15 minutes to go, don't we?
Well,
Only-
It seemed like a few of you still had conversations you wanted to finish versus us having to wait.
I could do